Hey everybody, welcome to the 1947 Rise podcast, a podcast that helps India born, US trained Indians get integrated into the Indian technology ecosystem and inspires them to move back to India to build massive tech companies and or help enable the tech ecosystem. We do this by interviewing India born, US trained Indians who have moved back to India and built massive tech companies themselves and or helped enable the tech ecosystem.
Awesome. I'm excited to have Vaibhav Domkundwar. Vaibhav is the CEO and founder of Better Capital. Better is the number one India focused pre seed fund with 150 plus investments, having led early bets in numerous breakout companies like Open, Rupeek, Teachmint, Khatabook, Slice, M2P, Kutam, and many more. The combined value of these companies is 5 billion plus. Before starting Better Capital, Vaibhav had founded a couple of companies in the Bay Area. Vaibhav, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Shiva. Good to be here with you and looking forward to this discussion.
Likewise. Vaibhav, let's start by you walking us through your journey of growing up in India, moving to US, and then moving back to India. What made you move back to India?
Yeah, let me give you sort of the zoomed out picture, and then we can double click as you'd like. So look, I think I grew up all over Maharashtra. My dad was in a transferable job, so we lived in multiple cities from Mumbai, Aurangabad, Nagpur, Amravati, and then Pune. And the longest I stayed in any particular city was actually Pune for 6 years or 8 years before I moved to the US. So schooling was all over. Pune was high school and college, and then my undergrad I went to the government college in Pune called COEP, and and then headed to Berkeley right after my masters, right after my bachelor's. So that was 96. I went to Berkeley 96 to 98, probably the most interesting period in my life, I would say, looking back. And then I think 96 to 98 was an interesting period in the Bay Area as you immerse yourself as an outsider into sort of the melting pot of tech. Everybody with a heartbeat in the Bay Area had an idea or two, right? And I fell into the same bucket. So I think worked for a year or so and then jumped into entrepreneurship. Started my first company with about four other experienced co-founders, and then started my second company after a few years. And during the course of this, I think we've always maintained ties back to India. So we were back in India every year. A bunch of family was back in India, and our both our businesses had offices in India, right? So the ties were fairly strong and never lost touch. Continue to drive in India. I mean, that's one thing people forget to drive in India when they move out. So I continue to do that. So that's that sort of connection, right? And I think over the years, what happens, Shiva, is at least my generation, right, where we moved in the 90s. I think everybody sort of had this classic first generation immigrant question of, hey, should we move back and things like that. And honestly, I think for us, it was less about that and more about, I think for my wife, it was about being closer to family for more time. And then for me, I think it was just to make sure we have our kids experience India, and where they belong to or originated from or something like that, right? Just for them to sort of get a broader view of the world and things like that. So I think that was a driving factor for us to move back. And honestly, I think we talked to a bunch of people. A lot of times it's a very hard decision, right? I mean, we all know it. It's a very, very hard decision. 99% people will not move back. There's no reason to move back. But I think for us, it was really more about not living with the regret, right? And so we just said we'll move. And we basically said if it doesn't work out, we'll move back, right? So we came with a very open mind. We moved back in 2012. It's been 9 years, like we just discussed, and can't be happier. I think my general view is putting yourself out of the comfort zone is always rewarding, right? There was that ad when we were growing up. I don't know if you ever saw it, which I think it was a soft drink ad or something like that, which basically said "Dar ke aage jeet hai," right? So It always works for me.
That was an inspiration, one of it.
I mean, it just stuck, right? When you
Yeah.
go through a lot of changes, you sort of realize that it's actually true.
No, Vaibhav. And in the beginning, like when you initially moved back, how did you feel? Like, were there, of course, were there self doubts? Was it difficult? And then eventually, how did Better Capital come about?
Sure. Look, I think I won't trivialize moving back. It's probably the hardest decision, right? And I think while we sort of did not kind of move with a baggage of, oh my god, this is a one-way journey for us or something like that, we kept it fairly open, so that was helpful. But honestly, it hit me when the container was parked in front of our house to pack our life in the US into that little box, right? So I think that is hard, honestly, right? But I think because we said, look, we're going to give it a shot, so that we never rethink about it. It was sort of comforting to say that, look, I think we'll see how it goes. Now, considering the fact that we had lived in India for quite a bit during those years. I mean, during all our visits, longer trips, and things like that, it was helpful to come back not to something that we were just touristing for 2 weeks. We had lived for longer periods in India as well, so it was easier. I think the hardest part was just, I think, mentally. I think most people know if they want to make it work or not. I think everybody wants to make it work, but I think US and India is apples and oranges. So we moved with a view of making it work, and thankfully that just sort of attitude helps a lot, right? I think if you look at everything with a positive attitude about why you're doing something, and everything else you can take it in a stride. So I think it worked out. Both me and my wife were, I think, very aligned on that, so that also helped. And yeah, I think 2012 India was very different. I mean, most of my network was back in the US, right? I honestly never worked in India, so didn't know anybody. Sort of, right? Most people had not moved back with me, and I think a year or two was settling down and stuff like that. And I was still running Better Labs, which is our startup studio that we started about 2005-6 time frame. And we've always had an office. So work-wise, it was like I'm just working in a different time zone. That's the bet I took, right? And my wife had left her long career at Cisco and taken time off, right? So it was easier from a work perspective. We were not moving to take up new jobs in India, right? So I think that was also comforting. But I think Better Capital, look, I think there was no plan, to be honest, right? When I moved back, we said, okay, we'll figure out how work happens, because I was giving up being in the valley to move to India so professionally. I don't think you can imagine that that's a great decision. Not in 2012, right? But I think it was more a personal decision and things like that. And I think I started to just get a pulse of the ecosystem over a couple of years. It was very underwhelming because you're just coming from a very mature ecosystem to a developing ecosystem. But I think I was able to appreciate where India was after a whole bunch of conversations over a couple of years, and I started doing angel checks, right? Very, very bad deal flow, because obviously I didn't know anybody, I didn't know how to read the market, none of that. But I think we knew that in our startup studio days, I had been an operator for a long time, right? So I think that was our pulse in terms of figuring out what we wanted to do. So 15 investments over 14, 15, 16, 2014, 15, 16, and okay-ish, except you always get one outlier and then it looks all great. So that was Rupeek for us, and I think the credit for that investment actually goes to Sumit, the founder of Rupeek. That's a story for another day, but that, I think, gave me a good experience of what I felt was an opportunity to dig into. So 2017, I did zero investments, and look, for 10 plus years, I was doing a startup studio, right? And where the model was that we were building our own ideas, I was self-financing it, and we were recruiting folks to build those, right? And we had a great amount of success for several years, but there was a nagging feeling that we were not unlocking the full potential of the ideas that we were getting right on timing. And that's exactly where I kept questioning if there another way. And if you look at Better Capital and Better Labs, which was our startup studio, It's actually the exact same thing with different models. The studio was where we were building it ourselves. Capital is really about investing, right? So I'm more of a builder than an investor, honestly, right? And I think that became sort of our wedge. And 2018 we started Better Capital, and in fact, the last check in Open's pre-seed was what we started with in Jan of 2018. I think for the longest time, I felt, okay, this is the once in a decade deal that I have. Maybe I should just stop investing now. But that's how that happened. I think a lot of people get the credit of the nudges along the way, and things like that. But we really started with saying that, hey, I'm doing 0 to 1 at Better Labs for so many years. I think there is another way to scale what we know, and that's how Better Capital happened, right? It was more of our own journey to unlock what we wanted to do than something external or investing as such or something like that. And so I think, look, 4 years, 150 plus companies, and you've seen us from the very beginning. So we've actually done almost everything very differently, from capital to volume to stage to a whole bunch of non-consensus bets. And I think I'm just lucky that some of the best founders chose to take some of our money.
No, you're a beast, my friend. I'm a big fan. As we were discussing earlier, I've been following your journey for the last 2.5, 3 years, and so you started investing in 2015, and you made, I think, 15 investments the first 3 years. Fast forward to from 2020 to 2021, you've made over 100 plus investments. And can you, Vaibhav, give us a quick overview of how the angel investing scene has evolved in India over the last 5, 6 years?
Yeah. So look, I think it is a different world altogether, right? I think the number of angel investors, the type of people who are angel investing, everything has changed, and so has the kinds of companies people are building for these new types of angel investors to want to invest in them. So I think compared to 2013, 14, 15, 16, when I was investing, to today, it's a world of a difference, right? I think, look, the kinds of companies we are building post Geo is very different than the companies that we built a decade before. And I appreciate why that difference is, because I think the TAM of internet connected users in India was just so low and growing so slowly. Correct. So I think Geo was a fundamental change for the ecosystem, I believe, right? And I think when you look at that, that was kind of the big change that happened for the types of companies to be created, the pace at which new startups are created, and then we also had sort of teams that had built and scaled products at some of the first gen companies, from Flipkart to Paytm to Zomato and things like that, right? So what we saw is pre-Geo, it was more transaction driven businesses, let's call dhanda type businesses. Great teams, they were building for where the market was, lots of learnings and everything. And post Geo, I think a lot of operators from those companies came and said, oh, I can build a new type of company now. A lot of inspiration from global markets, the Silicon Valley and things like that, right? And I think so I think angel investing was limited in the early days. I think capital was lesser, so you would find like HBS and Stanford and IIT grads struggling to raise 300K, and I saw all of it, right? I remember, I think even Rupeek's very early round was a lot of angel investors, right? Some of them continue to be good friends of mine. So I think the supply was limited. The quality was, it was a big distribution, and it was a smaller set of insiders who were doing angel investments that time. What happened post Geo is that a different set of companies were created. Right, they were all growing super fast because of distribution, and I think a lot of these folks who were building the first generation companies were doing angel checks as well, right? So the fabric of the ecosystem changed from the type of companies, the type of founders, and the type of early angel investors, right? Now, what remains constant though and becomes even harder today is how do you get access to some of the best investments, because money is made in venture only in the top 5-3% of the companies, right? And I think that has become harder and harder, right? So earlier, money was not as commoditized, let's say, as it is today, right? So everybody who is angel investing from that period is actually struggling if they are not or if they were not able to figure out that top tier access, right? And what worked for access during those days is not what works for access today, right? So I think angel investing has become definitely way harder, and I think it will continue to become harder because access will get worse and worse, especially with syndicates and micro VCs and all kinds of things, right? So I think it's a different beast altogether. However, the opportunity is probably way better than it was earlier, right? So better companies, larger companies, higher quality, everything, right? So I think it's a golden period that is really hard to crack, right? So I think a world of a difference for sure. World of a difference for sure. Like for example,
Yeah.
Vaibhav in 2013 who just moved back. If that was me today, man, I would struggle. So I had the runway I had the runway to figure it out before it became this intense.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Weber. In fact, I was, talking to a few angel friends of mine where they were like, Shiva, few years back, it was difficult to get the round done. We would have to invite our friends, hey, invest in X company, Y company. Versus to today, they'll get a call from the founder, and founder would tell them, hey, you'll probably have a day or two to decide if you're coming in or not.
Totally.
And
I can see that because I used to do the same thing, right? Try to figure out how to construct the round. Now I have to tell the founders, hey, please do not say that you've signed our term sheet, because I have the opposite problem. Because no matter how much I want to collaborate and bring the right people in, it becomes exactly opposite, right? So yeah, completely changed. Great for founders, actually. Great for founders. They
yeah,
deserve it.
great for the founders, great for the ecosystem. Wherever you've had a lot of success, over the years. I think your portfolio companies are valued over $5 billion. You've got one unicorn in your portfolio. You're gonna few of your portfolio companies are on their path to reach that valuation. And but the reality is, of course, people are seeing the success part, not the how you reach that level. Plus, like what are the things that you still struggle with?
Yeah, look, I think, like I told you, I think better capital, better labs to better capital was a journey that was very, I think, driven by what I had experienced over the years, and I knew why I was doing better capital, right? And we were investing at the idea stage, the hardest stage. We were not trying to say that, hey, can I get allocation in a round that is happening? Correct. We were just trying to figure out what we wanted to invest in, and that becomes the hardest, because then you are responsible for helping the founders through as well, right? So I think when we invest at the idea stage, at the pre-seed stage, and in a very shallow and competitive capital market, wherein these days with everybody doing very early stage checks as well, whenever I meet a great founder, I basically assume that they've met everybody and everybody has passed, right? And I'm still taking that call, which means that I have the pressure of saying that, look, am I really, really, really sure that I have the confidence and the conviction to figure this out, right? So I think that, Shiva, continues to be the hardest thing, right? I have been a founder and operator for 20 years. I haven't missed payroll, and I know what that means, right? And when you're taking that investment decision on a pure PowerPoint most of the times, you you're really, you have to be honest with yourself, right? So for me, when we are investing, I want to be very clear about my why, right? I write an investment memo for everything that we do, and I don't want to be bullshitting myself, right? and and I think that is the hardest thing, right? When you make up that decision and several times, from, let's say, an open to Kutum to Teachmint to Philo to so many, where we knew that we are taking very non-consensus bets, right? So I think that continues to be the hardest part, Shiva, right? As in, how do you figure out the confidence to make it happen, right, along with the founders, and how do you figure out your conviction? Because look, I think negative conviction is easy, right? Feeling safe is very easy, right? But I think the venture is really about that unique point of view, right? So how do you how do you keep that rawness of the decision that, let's say, I must have made when I made the open investment in 2018? And I think that's very core, right? So you have to be raw, but the weight of success is really bad, actually, right? Because once you are successful, you in investing, and that is, luck has such a big part to play in it, but you end up becoming less raw and more safe, and that is really bad. And I think, as an entrepreneur, I think I remind myself that I can't overanalyze, right? At this stage, there is only so much information. So I think that whole, conviction building, being brutally honest, not BSing yourself, and still finding the confidence to say that, look, I really like this, because I'm doing pre-seeds, right? Over the last 2 years, we lead pre-seed rounds, either do it entirely or sort of, get some of the value added folks along with us, right? um, and that continues to be the hardest for me, right? It never gets easy, because, whatever you did last year which succeeded has no relation to the call that I'm going to take tomorrow. So it's a brand new start with a brand new team, and yeah. But that's what I do it for as well, right? So
No, very well put, Vaibhav, and thanks for sharing it. What's the best part about your job?
I think, it's the best founder market fit, man, right? So I think, going back all the way, right? If you look at, I think, while I was at Berkeley, I did a summer. So I came from a mechanical engineering background, right? Very, like, I graduated from COEP. I had a job at Telco, which is Tata Motors today, and I thought I'll do mechanical engineering stuff. I think Berkeley was very enlightening in terms of opening my point of view to doing anything. And I did a crazy number of things at Berkeley, honestly, right? But one summer, I went and worked at what was the best mechanical design company that time, called Pro Engineer, right? And that summer, I basically said, "Oh wow, this is amazing," because now I know that I don't want to do this, right? So I think all along, I think it's life experiences that create your framework. But I basically said, how do I figure out what I want to do by saying no to what I don't, what I know what I don't want to do? See, basically, it's very hard to figure out what you want to do on a, infinite set of possibilities. So I think one way to do it is, hey, what do I have access to? And then quickly say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, right? So it's very easy to filter. So I think that's been the driving factor to choosing, right? And I think I chose entrepreneurship. I can't imagine rethinking that ever, right? Over 20 plus years, irrespective of success, failures, money, whatever, right? And when we did Better Labs for so many years, I think probably most of my wealth creation happened there. I think the only frustrating part was unlocking the full potential, right? So when I stumbled onto the capital model in my own way, as a continuation or unlocking solution, I came across this snippet, I think, from one of Tim Ferriss's books, which basically said, in a nutshell, sometimes it's not the driver, it is the car, right? So Better Labs was one car and Better Capital is another car. I loved my journey in the Better Labs car, but I think the unlocking solution lied in changing the car, not changing myself, right?
Yeah.
So that was really helpful. So I think it just I love what I do. That this is what I've done all my lives, right? So, but I think the changing car helped because at this stage of my life, I think the founders that we partner with are like way better than I ever was. So I'm happy that I'm able to still do what I love to do and in a model that I think can scale for the next 20 years.
Love it, Vaibhav, and I'm happy for you. We'll switch gears here. So back in 2012, when you moved back to India, it was a very unheard move, or it wasn't like heard, right? Like people wouldn't move back to India. 99.99% wouldn't move back to India. Versus fast forward to today, the ecosystem is maturing. People are taking a note, and a lot of them are in fact looking to move back to India. If you were to move back to India, let's say next month, what would you work on, and also what advice would you give to those who are thinking about moving back to India?
Great question. So look, I think my biggest advice would be that don't move back to India for work. I think that is very hard and not something even I would do myself. Knowing what I know now, the opportunity, everything, right? Because I think it's a very hard move depending on what life stage somebody is in, and unless you have a bigger reason about wanting to be back in India for family, the vibe that you enjoy here, or that you're going to spend the next 5 or 10 years for different reasons. I think that combined with the work opportunity is a great solution, right? But just like, hey, I want to go build a startup in India, may not be the right call, because life has many more things than just the work that you will do. And India is hard, right? I mean, you look outside and you're like, I mean, like you said, when we first moved back, people were like, oh, what happened? As in, they thought something went wrong, that's why you've come back.
Yeah.
Like, no, nothing went wrong. We just decided to move back. So I think my advice would be that have a more holistic purpose and plan that is not just work centric and something broader. If you're married, if you have kids, lot of other considerations come in picture. I think for us, it was really, I think, taking care of health. I mean, health and education were the two big buckets that we were unsure of. Thankfully, we found solutions that worked out, right? So I would say that for longevity of the move, you need something bigger, right? Now, having said that, let's say somebody says that, okay, I've figured that out, and I think this is not going to be a haphazard decision, and we're well thought and we're clear. I think work-wise, there's just tremendous opportunity. I think this is a decade that will belong to India. I think the quality and the compounding of that quality is happening at a pace that we've never seen before, right? Which means you're going to be just empowered doing stuff in India, right? So as an entrepreneur, let's say, or as an investor, right? So both the roles that I'm familiar with, I think it's a great time. If I were to move today and start, I think I would actually spend I would spend some time just building the network, honestly, right? Because I think without the network, it's really, really hard just to figure out where you are, right? If you're moving back from the US and if you have something that becomes very valuable, let's say you're an entrepreneur there itself, or you were high up in one of the big techs and had a unique point of view, or you're an investor in one of the larger firms, I think all of those are great wedges, right? But I think that independent network is very important. I would also stress that personal brand is very important. I think the future of everything is a personal brand, right? From creators in e-commerce or entertainment to venture capital, right? I think one of our investments is a company called Philo, Phyllo, and they're essentially creating kind of the data layer for the creator economy. And I think he gave me the best compliment, Akhil, the founder. He said, "Oh, Vaibhav, you're the only creator VC I know." And I said, "Oh, wow." I never thought of it until he said it. I said, "Yes, maybe that's
You
what."
said it.
So I think growth hacking your career, or not growth, but the growth, the hacking part of the growth hacking is very important today, right? You can't just arrive and imagine that things will
And then
happen to
figure
you.
it out.
So you got to figure it out, right? You got to leverage your resume, your personal brand, wedge, network, all of that, right? Because everybody is running at a particular pace in India right now. No matter who you are, you can't just jump in and imagine that stuff will happen to you. And I think,
Mhm.
and that's what, honestly, I did as well. Where in 2018, I wasn't even sure if I'd be a good investor. Correct. So I think you just have to do stuff. And I think if you figured out the move from the holistic perspective, then I would just kind of think like you are starting from scratch and hustle all the way across everything, right? I think I've seen a lot of folks who move from sort of destinations like the Silicon Valley um, sort of carry that, potentially, if you could call it, a sense of entitlement, and I think that doesn't work, right? I've lived there, and there are lots of myths about Silicon Valley as well, right? So I think we need to cut through all of that, and I think to be successful in the move and work here in a new ecosystem, you got to leverage what you know, but you got to build from scratch.
What drives Vaibhav?
What drives? I think um, I have a simple theory around potential, right? Uh, and basically, I think if we are decently successful, all of us essentially have enough to live a comfortable life, financially secure, and things like that. And I think I crossed that bridge a while ago. So I think the question became, why do you do what you do, right? And I think for me, it is really about um, unlocking your full potential, right? And and I think that's very inspiring. That I've never had Monday blues ever in my life, because I always chose to do what I was doing. I wasn't forced to do it, right, through any choices that I made that may not be optimal. I kept changing things, right, because I was very independent. So I think that gave me the opportunity to question, what do I do next, right? I think growth happens outside the comfort zone. So how do you reinvent yourself every 5 years, right? Um, 2018, I did not know what Better Capital would be, right? I don't know what Better Capital will be in 2025. And we every year, I think, we basically kept asking the question of what we can do with Better Capital, within the constraints of how we want to do it, right? So how we want to do it was very important, right? But within that, then how do I unlock the potential? How big can it be? And things like that. And it wasn't about money; it was really more about potential, right? And India is at a period where this decade can be very, very interesting, right? So how do you work in that time period? How do you not miss? How do you be raw and all of those, right? So I think it is really about having a framework and a structure to help you do what you want to do. And I'm fortunate that I stumbled into that one way or the other. But I think what drives every day is just continuously unlocking potential, right? And potential is expandable, Shiva, right? So you reach a certain potential, and then you expand from there, and then you expand from there. And I think that's very inspiring, right? I think excellence really lies in your ability to think that way. So I think I'm just very brutally honest about all of that, because I'm not doing it for somebody else. I'm not looking for validation, and I'm just doing it for myself, right?
Yourself, yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that framework and that whole, I guess, seeking expansion of potential is what it is. Because at the end of the day, it's all about learning, right? You feel excited when you learn more, right? I'm a learner. Let's put it that way, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I, yesterday I just spent, I think, 2-3 hours with somebody in the crypto space who's been there for 4 years. not on the tech side, but on the marketing side. And he's probably 20 years younger to me. And I do that. I was just listening. I was learning from him, right? And it's not that we were trying to solve big problems. We were just trying to be authentic and just share journeys and things like that, right? So I think that whole that's what drives me, right? Authenticity, expansion of potential, and sort of people. That's it, yeah. Because I think it's all
Learning.
relationship eventually.
Yeah. Love it, Vaibhav. Really appreciate you for taking the time to come on the podcast and talk about your journey. And thanks for moving back to India, and you've been enabling the tech ecosystem for the last, 4 or 5 years, and this is only the beginning, right? And I'm personally excited to see your journey the next 5 years or 10 years, even further. Appreciate it, Vaibhav. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me, Shiva. It was wonderful.